Hello, friends, and thank you as always for visiting the Legend Sports Universe YouTube channel, Legend Sports Universe, where legends play forever. This is the Franchise Stars Baseball League. We are going to take a look as we have reached the final week of the regular season. We're going to take a look at the playoff picture. Both leagues have one team unsettled, the second wild card spot, to make the playoffs. So we're going to look at the scenarios, and then we're going to check out where things ended up heading into the final day of the season, and then we'll set up the broadcast that we're going to do for the final day of this regular season. So we'll take a look at the standings here. This is September 26th. Every team has 6 or 7 games left in the regular season. Where we stand, the American League East has been clinched by the Boston Red Sox, 101-55. Hey, Big Clue, there are 2 wild cards in each league. This is last year's game, so it's before the new rules took in place for that are probably, I assume, are in place. I don't have the game, but I assume they're in place for MLB The Show 23. So this is the old format with the 2 wild cards. You can't customize the league, unfortunately. I would love to have kind of done a realignment kind of thing and not have had any wild cards, but I am limited in that regard. So it's the 3 division winners and 2 wild cards in each league. The 2 wild cards, of course, will do that 1 game playoff, which I frankly hate, but it is what it is. So the Red Sox win the division. The Yankees have clinched the first wild card spot in the American League, 94-62, 600 ball. They're going to look to finish at 600 here, going down the final week, but they have locked up that first wild card position. In the American League Central, the Cleveland Indians righted the ship after a slow start. The Indians have clinched the Central, 87-69. They'll try to get to that 90 win mark. They have played much better in the second half of this season than the first half. The Indians were thought that they were going to win this division before the league started. They had a very good draw in their opening 40-man pool out of the 100 master player pool for year 1. But the Indians were sluggish out of the gate. Everybody except the Tigers, the most disappointing team in the league, hung around, had a share of first place at some point, but nobody ever was able to break away. And then once the Indians were able to get hot, the Indians were able to open up some distance there, and they have clinched the American League Central. The Oakland A's are the best team in the American League, 106-50, a 679 clip, 26 games ahead of the California Angels. The A's are frankly just a fantastic team. They have incredible depth top to bottom in the lineup. Their pitching has been exceptional. The A's are going to be a tough out for anybody. So, we're going to take a quick look now at the AL wildcard spot. As Clue notes, yes, they absolutely ran with it. Now, nobody else in this division got a particularly good draw. The Mariners, actually, I felt like got a pretty good draw, and it just didn't play out. They got Griffey Jr., they got Ichiro, they got Julio Rodriguez, they got Brett Boone, and it just didn't click. And their pitching was by no means good, but it wasn't horrendous. But the A's just had such a better draw than anybody else in this division. But you look at the Angels, 26 games back, and yet when we go to the wild card standings, the California Angels are tied for that second wild card spot with the Baltimore Orioles at 80-76 coming down to this final week. The Angels have really, it seems like, done it with mirrors. Their pitching has been better than I expected it to be. They've gotten big hits when they have needed to. The American League is incredibly top heavy. You've got the Yankees, the Red Sox, and the A's over 600. You've got the Indians, and I think I said they were like 580. And then you've got those 3 teams right around the 500 mark, and everybody else is sub 500. So the American League is hugely top heavy. But the Yankees are going to be put into a 1-game playoff against one of these teams. The Orioles have won 3 in a row. The Angels had rattled off 9 straight wins at the beginning of September to get themselves back into this hunt. So they would be quite a story here in the AL. We'll look at the team schedules in a little bit, but first we're going to bounce over. We're going to take a look at the National League setup as we entered the final week. And the National League, pretty simple here. The Expos haven't clinched yet. Their magic number's 4. They are 3 games up on the Braves, 3.5 games up on the Mets. Clue God, I appreciate that joke so much because my wife is the same. We'll leave it at that. I kind of hit the jackpot there. The Phillies, 6 games out. Their tragic number is 1. They've gone 2-8 in the last 10. So the Phillies are on the verge of being eliminated from this, but technically they are still in it on the very fringe. The NL Central. The Cardinals, kind of in a similar situation to the Indians in the American League. Yeah, you know what? I didn't spend enough time talking about that. Hold on a second. Let's get back to this because the Expos, yes, 545 for a division leader isn't a great record, but the Expos have pulled off just a terrific job. I kept thinking that they were going to fade. The pitching held up, and it actually cooled off a bit in the second half, but their lineup so outperformed what I thought it was going to. The Expos have Bryce Harper and Andre Dawson. I knew that they would perform, but all the secondary guys on the Expos all performed to the high end of where you would have expected them to. You know, your Moises Alous, your Jose Vidros, your Ryan Zimmermans, guys like that. Every one of them performed onto the high end of what you would expect their range to be. So because of that, the Expos, in a division where no other team got an excellent draw, the Braves got great pitching but not a great offensive draw. The Mets got a great pitching but not a great offensive draw. The Phillies got a decent draw in both regards. You look at the runs allowed, everybody else in the league is in the 600s and 700s. The Braves, Mets, and Phillies have all allowed fewer than 600 runs. The pitching in this division has been great, but just nobody really had a good enough offense, and the Expos were able to pitch well enough and get enough offense to get them to this division. So the Expos may pull this off. You can see, though, they've lost four games of ground to the Braves in these last 10. They've lost a game of ground to the Mets as well. So the Expos will try to hold on. But yeah, as Clue noted, that the Expos, it's just a go Expos. They are a great story. And it looks like they're going to make the postseason in some fashion or another. So now we'll get back to the Central. The Cardinals, as I was mentioning, the Cardinals kind of have some similarities to the Indians. The Cardinals did not start off great this year. And again, this is a division where nobody got a really great draw. The 40-man draw thing, again, if you're new to following the Franchise Stars Baseball League, every franchise has a 100-player pool of their best players in history. This first season started with a random 40-player pool from that 100-player pool. So, like, lots of teams don't have their best ever player yet. You know, the Braves don't have Aaron, for example. The Yankees don't have Ruth Mantle or DiMaggio, which makes what the Yankees accomplished, all the more impressive. The Cardinals got the best draw in this division, and they were expected to run away with it, but it took a while for that to happen. The Pirates did not get a great draw. The Brewers, by their standards, I guess got an okay draw. The Brewers' pitching has actually significantly outperformed expectations, kind of led by the recent guard of Woodruff and Corbin Burns. The Reds didn't get a great draw either. So, I mean, those other teams kind of hung around, but eventually they just didn't have the firepower to hang with the Cardinals here. So the Cardinals have clinched the Central. They are locked in there. In the West, the counter to the Oakland A's, the San Francisco Giants, 105-51, 18 games up on the Dodgers, who by no means have been bad. Dodgers' offense isn't great, but their pitching is exceptional. But the Giants have just been on cruise control. They opened up the season 11-0, and they just never really took their foot off the gas. So the Giants have locked that up. Now we check the wild card situation. The Dodgers have all but clinched that first wild card spot. Again, the elimination over the Mets is 6. So the Dodgers are really sitting in pretty good shape there. They're 5 games up on the Braves with 6 games remaining. So the Dodgers have all but locked up that first wild card spot, despite going 3-7 in the last 10. As we mentioned, the Braves have gotten hot. They've won 8 of their last 10. The Mets 5-5 in their last 10. So there you see the Braves have a half-game lead for that second wild card spot. Mets the half game back. Phillies and Pirates 3 games back. Brewers on the fringe 6 games back. Their tragic number is 1. So we're going to go and we're going to check out some schedules here going into this final week, and then we'll kind of look at how things played out a bit. So we're going to stay in the National League for now. Check out this schedule. The Atlanta Braves go into Montreal, who they trail by 3 games, for a 3-game set at the beginning of this week. The Braves then go home to host the Mets for a 3-game set to wrap up the regular season. So the Braves have a lot of control of their own destiny going here in this final week. You'll see that series will open up with Jim Whitney and Steven Strasburg in the pitching matchup there. Kid Nichols, Javier Vasquez, John Smoltz, Steve Rogers will be the final matchup in that finale. Take a look here. Let's go. Marlins aren't a factor. The Mets, as we mentioned, now the Mets have played 1 more game than the rest of these teams, which is why they're the half game back of the Braves. The Mets only have 5 games remaining. They do have 2 games against the Marlins, but then they head to Atlanta for that 3-game set against the Braves. You have to think that that series is going to be hugely important in settling this National League. The Phillies go to Chicago. Chicago in the cellar of the National League Central. Again, the Phillies are kind of a little bit on the periphery at this point, but the Phillies are not out of it as of yet. They then go after Chicago to play 3 games in Montreal. So if the Braves are able to get the job done in Montreal against the Expos, the Phillies could theoretically end up in a position where they go into Montreal with a chance to knock the Expos out of the playoffs completely and slip into that wild card spot, with the Braves, of course, then possibly winning the division. The Expos, there we said, they host Atlanta for 3, then they host Philadelphia for 3. That will wrap up their season. The only one on the periphery, the Pittsburgh Pirates, 3 games at home against the Cincinnati Reds, and then 3 games in St. Louis. That's a tall order for the Pirates. I know the Reds haven't been great, but the Reds are kind of, relatively on par with the Pirates. You don't expect the Pirates to get a sweep there, and they pretty much need to kind of win out at this point with the teams that they would have to jump. So the Pirates are up against it a bit to try to get that done. But we show their schedule because they are still technically in the hunt. We look into the American League. Again, the Baltimore Orioles. The Orioles have a tough row to hoe here, because even though they are tied for that second wild card position at this point, the Orioles play 3 in Boston and then 3 in New York against the Yankees. That is not who you want to be battling to try to go and earn that playoff spot. So the Orioles, if the Orioles manage to pull this off, the Orioles are going to have earned it, because they are going to have to beat 2 of the 3 top teams in the American League to get themselves into the postseason. The Red Sox, Red Sox have clinched, so I don't really need to look at them. The Yankees have locked up their spot, so they're going to kind of finish off in cruise control a bit as well. The White Sox, still in the thick of it. They're 2 games behind Minnesota, so the White Sox are 4 games out of that wild card spot at this point. They go into Minnesota for 3. But if the White Sox can pull that off, they then go into San Diego, one of the worst teams in baseball, for a 3-game set. So the White Sox are still clinging to a bit of hope here. Indians are good. The Royals, again, Royals are on the Royals tanked, that's right, the Royals fell out of it. So the Royals are done. So Minnesota hosts the White Sox for 3, then Minnesota gets to go into Detroit. Detroit, the worst team in the division. I've beaten that drum repeatedly about how disappointing the Tigers have been. So Minnesota will get to go in there. So the Twins have a interesting road here. If they can get through that White Sox series and take 2 out of 3 there before they head into Detroit, the Twins would sign up for that right now, I think. Your last team, though, the California Angels. Now, the Angels tied with the Orioles. We already talked about the Orioles having the tough road between the Red Sox and the Yankees. California, even though it's at home, they're going to host the A's for a 3-game set. So they face the powerhouse for 3 games. So again, if the Angels are able to do this, they're going to have earned it. If they get past the A's, they have 3 games then with the Rangers to try to wrap things up with. So, I mean, the Angels, that A's draw, I know the A's don't really have anything to play for, but it's not the final weekend of the season. It's still a few days before that. So the A's are going to play their starters, and the A's are going to run their rotation out there. So you see the pitching matchups. Witt and Rube Waddell, who's probably the pitcher of the year in the American League. Irvin Santana and Tim Hudson, who already has 20 wins. Hudson's been exceptional. And Andrew Heaney and Catfish Hunter. So the Angels are going to have a tough setup here. So what we're going to do, give me 2 seconds. I've got to turn off the oven. I got a roast going on for dinner, and then we're going to go and do a quick sim. Give me 10 seconds. We'll be back here, and then we're going to take a look at how things ended up going into the final day of the season and see if we have some resolution. Apologies for that. I had started the broadcast forgetting that I had gotten that going. All right, so I think this is probably going to cut off on you for 2 seconds visually while we switch. So now that we've laid everything out, we're going to back out of this. And then we're going to go to be simmed up to the last day of the season. It's just not feasible for me to do all the broadcasts of all the relevant games in this final week. So we decided that I would just go and sim to the final day, and then we'll play out any relevant games on the final day. So we get ourselves to September 2nd. And let's take a look at what happened in this final week. There's 1 game left for every team. We are on the final Sunday of the season. We start off in the National League. The Montreal Expos have clinched the division title. The Expos got it done. So let's take a look at the team. Actually, let's look at it this way. I like looking at it this way better. So the Expos took 2 of 3 from the Braves. Strasburg with the win. Vasquez with the win. John Smoltz outdueled Steve Rogers in the finale, but the Expos took 2 of 3 there, which really left the Expos sitting pretty. They split the first 2 games against the Phillies, but the Expos are locked in to the division title in the National League East. We're going to jump back, though, to the Atlanta Braves. So there you see the Braves there. They lost the 2 of 3 in Montreal. They then hosted the New York Mets. Obviously huge at that point because the Mets had won both of their games against the Marlins. So the Mets came into Atlanta then a game up. It would be in the wild card spot. The Braves won game 1 of that series 2-1. Greg Maddux outduels Al Leiter, replacing the injured Sid Fernandez. A 2-1 victory for the Braves. Then on Saturday, the Braves do it to the Mets again. Warren Spahn outduels Tom Seaver in a 2-0 victory for the Braves. So the Braves take the first 2 games. They now have a game lead on the Mets as we head into the final Sunday. So now the Mets need a win here to force a 1-game playoff with the Braves to see who gets that second wild card spot. The Phillies dropped 2 of 3 to the Cubs. That eliminated the Phillies. The Pirates took 2 of 3 in Cincinnati, but they then dropped the first 2 games against St. Louis, so that dropped the Pirates out of it too. So your National League playoff situation looks this way. The Dodgers have clinched that first wild card spot. The Braves are a game up on the Mets now. The Mets need to win the Sunday game. If they win that game, it will force a game 163, a one-game playoff with the Braves to see who gets the second wild card. And then it's a quick turnaround for that team because they will then have the one-game wild card playoff game against the Dodgers. As for the American League, we'll take a look at the relevant teams in their schedules here. We'll start off with the Baltimore Orioles. The Orioles dropped 2 of 3 in Boston and then dropped the first 2 in New York. So the Orioles did not get the job done when they needed to. We said that was going to be a tough order for them to try to pull off, and it proved to be absolutely that for the Orioles. That is just a rough ask them to beat 2 of the 3 best teams in the league over the final 6 games to earn their playoff supper. So now we head out into the Central. Apologies, I'm kind of hitting wrong buttons here. There we go. So the White Sox went into Minnesota. I'm sorry, they hosted Minnesota. They got routed 9-0 in Game 1. Ted Lyons gets blitzed by the Twins. Twins then beat them 7-6 in Game 2. So the Twins took 2 of 3 from the White Sox, which pretty much ended the White Sox hopes. The White Sox did take the first 2 out in San Diego, but the White Sox are done at this point. The Twins, again, they took those 2 of 3 in Chicago, but they went into Detroit, lost the first game of that series, and then picked up the 1-0 victory, getting a huge start. Bert Blyleven, let's check out that box score a minute here. 1 run in that game in the third, RBI from Joe Mauer. So Blyleven goes 8 scoreless innings, strikes out 9, walks 2, allows 7 hits in a huge performance for the Twins that they desperately needed. We now head out to California, and we said the Angels trying to get it done in a 3-game set against Oakland was going to be tough. They dropped all 3 of them. 11-4, 3-2, and 5-2. The A's sweep the Angels, which eliminates the Angels, I believe. Actually, no, I'm sorry. No, it doesn't. It didn't eliminate them because they then went into Texas. That's right. They then went into Texas and won the 2 games against the Rangers. So now let's take a look at the American League spot. So the Angels should have been dead to rights after getting swept by the A's. But the Angels still, because of other teams' failures, still hold that second wild card spot. They are a game up on the Orioles and the Twins. So the Angels, Orioles, and Twins enter the final Sunday of the season, all with a possibility of getting that second American League wild card. So now this sets up, we are going to do multiple broadcasts for the final day of the season. Methadone for Life, how are you, sir? I appreciate you joining. Yeah, the Braves have stuck it to the Mets. It's kind of like real life. The Braves take the first 2 of that 3-game set against the Mets. Now all the pressure is on the Mets to come through in that big game, and they beat Seaver in the second game of that series to do it. So that pitching matchup is, I believe it's Jerry Kuzman. It's Kuzman or Cohen? I gotta check. Hold on. We'll go and we'll answer that. Calendar. Jim Whitney and David Cohn is scheduled to be the pitching matchup for that final game. And again, the Braves have a little bit of wiggle room. If the Braves lose that game, it just forces a 1-game playoff on Monday the 3rd with the Mets for that spot. Braves win, and they're in. So how we're going to handle this, we're going to do the Atlanta Mets game because that will potentially set everything up in the National League. We're then going to give the Angels the first game in the American League. We're going to do the Angels and the Rangers. Mike Witt, Yu Darvish will be the matchup there. If the Angels win that game, the Angels will get the second wild card in the American League. From there, we will go to Baltimore. If the Angels lose that game, so we do have a possibility of a 3-team tie in the American League for that second wild card spot. The Orioles are going to have to ask Harry Howell to battle CC Sabathia on the final day of the season. I may go and check in and see if a pitcher is rested for these games, if it's the most logical starter. You're playing for your playoff life. You're kind of going to play your best hand forward. So I may go in there and kind of override that a little bit because the game won't do that on its own. But I believe the schedule is Howell against Sabathia. Let me see, because when did Mussina pitch for them? Mussina pitched yesterday, so Mussina isn't a bullet that's in that gun. Yeah, so I mean, it may end up having to be Howell. Howell's the number 2. So so it'll be Howell and Sabathia in the Sunday game. We will then play, if it ends up still being relevant, the Twins at the Tigers. Johan Santana and Mark Fidrych. The matchup there. Mark Fidrych has lost 21 games. You don't know, Fidrych was like 2-14. So Fidrych has actually righted the ship over the past couple of months of this season, relatively speaking. But God, the Tigers have been terrible. Pitchers like Fidrych in all-time kind of leagues like this generally struggle because most games don't know how to handle pitchers who effectively put the ball in play. Fidrych never struck out a lot of guys. So if you're a pitcher who doesn't strike out a lot of guys and you play in a Legends kind of league, and I found this with virtually every game I've ever played, just not non-strikeout pitchers tend to struggle a bit. But Fidrych was exceptionally bad early on. It was almost it was to the point where I almost felt like I had to adjust his ratings. It was how bad it was. But he did kind of right that ship earlier on. His ERA was up around 6. He's brought it down to a more respectable 4.5. But Johan Santana hopes to be able to take the mound with a game on the line. So we'll do the Braves Mets broadcast first. I don't know if I'm going to get to them this weekend. I might be able to get that one done tomorrow. But it's probably going to go into next week, and then we're going to go through the whole list. So we will do Mets-Braves, their matchup. Then we will do the Angels-Rangers game, because those two games, depending on how they go, could wrap up the whole thing, and then the regular season would be over. And then from there, we'll do the Orioles-Yankees game if we have to resolve anything, and then we'll do the Twins and Tigers if it's required, in order for us to get resolution here. But I don't want to do more broadcasts than I have to do, because again, the season has taken a while for one thing. So, we're sorry, I just got a message from work. So I don't want to go taking any long, because I am going to broadcast every playoff game. In the hockey and the basketball, I was kind of doing the first game of each series and then potential elimination games. Baseball is my favorite sport. I love doing it. This is the league I'm most into and the most other people are into. So we're going to broadcast the entire playoffs for the Franchise Stars Baseball League here on the channel. And that should be almost daily starting probably next week. We'll start getting into the playoffs kind of hot and heavy here. So last thing we'll do quick, we're going to check out the leaderboards. I don't think there's really any races in the leaderboards for the last day, but we're going to check them out anyway. Eddie Collins looks to have the American League batting title wrapped up. Collins at 358. Tommy Henrik's fascinating season for the Yankees lands him in second. Reggie Smith has been great. Ted Williams is up in fourth. Jimmy Fox in fifth. Griffey, Judge, and Sweeney round out the top 8 for now, but that's a 14-point difference going into the final game. That doesn't look like it's going to evaporate on Eddie Collins unless something goes dramatically wrong. In the National League, Slide and Billy Hamilton will take the batting title in the NL. Zach Wheat kind of fell off over this past month, and Billy Hamilton did not. 368 to 352. He's got a 16-point advantage there. So sliding Billy Hamilton, who's been exceptional all season for the Phillies, will walk off with the National League batting title. Him, Wheat, Helton, Jim Edmonds, Matt Holliday are your top 5 there in the NL. We'll go to home runs. Willie Stretch McCovey, who has been unconscious for the last 2 months, leads the National League in homers with 51. Terrific season for Stretch. Johnny Mize of the Cardinals with 46. Willie Mays with 45. Rogers Hornsby also with 45. Bryce Harper. Nate Colbert has been really the port in the storm for the Padres with 44. In the American League, Ken Griffey Jr., the final day of the season, Griffey will try to hit number 60. He's got 59 home runs for the Franchise Stars Baseball League lead. Mark McGwire of the A's with 48. Manny Ramirez, who has also been scalding hot down the stretch for the Indians, with 43. Jimmy Fox with 42. Lou Gehrig. Gehrig's season ends up being amazing because Gehrig in April was horrifically bad. He still ends up 297, 41 homers, 108 runs batted in. He's still got one more day to go. But that's an outstanding job for Gehrig to kind of battle back because he basically lost a month of the season, given how bad he was there. Mark McGwire leads the American League in RBIs with 145, up on Griffey, who has 134. Manny Ramirez at 120. Reggie Smith, Jimmy Fox, your top 5 there. Willie Mays leads the National League in RBIs. He should win the RBI title at 128. Bryce Harper with 121. Teammate Willie McCovey with 118. Matt Holliday, great season for the Rockies, even though the Rockies stunk, with 112. The Rockies had a good offense. The Rockies just couldn't pitch, which is kind of the hallmark for the Rockies, as you would expect. And Johnny Mize, 5th in RBIs at 110. Stolen bases, Jose Reyes leads the National League with 50. Again, this is with 1 game left in the season if you are joining us late. And kind of can watch back for the recap of the final week of the season and the broadcast schedule for the final day of the season. The final second wild card spot in both leagues still up for grabs. Your overall stolen base leader, here's one that's not a shocker. Rickey Henderson of the A's, 69 stolen bases for Oakland. Rickey leads the way, and he has that comfortably in range. For wins, Ron Guidry, John Lester. The American League has 4 20-game winners. Guidry, Lester, Monbiquette, and Hudson. Only Guidry is the ace of his staff. So you had a lot of lower-tier starters on really strong teams rack up the wins there in the American League. Jack Quinn, who may very well get ousted from the A's rotation next year because they drafted Eddie Plank. So Jack Quinn is going to win 19 games and possibly not even be in the rotation next year. So we'll see how that all plays out. Not to put the cart ahead of the horse. Joe McGinnity and Larry Jansen of the Giants, both with 19 wins. Ben McDonald of the Brewers with 18. Jorge De La Rosa, Jerry Koosman, Randy Johnson with 17 wins here in the NL. Saves, Felipe Vasquez will win that for the Pirates, 51 saves for him. Raleigh Fingers will win the title in the American League, 49 saves for the powerhouse A's. Rube Waddell will try to hold on to that ERA title. Johan Santana does have 1 start left. Santana will start the final game of the season for the Twins. He'll hope to put up a good enough outing that can not only possibly get the Twins into the playoffs, pending the Orioles and Angels results, but can also get him ahead of Waddell for the ERA title there. Guidry, Hudson, McClanahan, Lyons, Martinez, and Lester round out the ERA leaders in the American League. In the National League, Tom Seaver leads the way there, 2.35. Randy Johnson, the big unit, 2nd. Clayton Kershaw, 3rd. Greg Maddux, Robin Roberts, Jerry Koosman, Joe McGinnity, Carl Hubble round out your top 8 in the National League ERA race. We'll check out strikeouts, and that'll be it. David Cone leads the National League in strikeouts, a little bit ahead of Randy Johnson and Sandy Koufax. Dazzy Vance, Max Scherzer, Seaver, Sid Fernandez, and Orville overall in the National League. Pedro Martinez has the strikeout title in the American League, 242. Rube Waddell and Sam McDowell at 232. Burt Blyleven, Lefty Grove, Yu Darvish, Johan Santana, and Dutch Leonard round it out. So no real races other than that American League ERA race as far as the leaderboards. So again, broadcast schedule, I don't know exactly when they will be, but it'll be Braves and Mets. Try to decide the National League wild card. Then it will be Angels and Rangers. Those are two definite broadcasts that will happen. And then pending those results, Orioles, Yankees, and then, if necessary, to settle things, Twins and Tigers will be the next series of broadcasts on the channel here. So that should wrap it up. I thank you guys for joining me. Hope this was a enjoyable listen. I appreciate you guys following this season. This has been an absolute blast, and the playoffs should be a really, really fun ride. So Clue, Methadone for life. Anyone else who has watched now or is watching on tape delay, greatly appreciate it, guys. Be good to each other. Get ready for a fun final day of the season. We'll talk soon.